This video is brought to you by Ground News. When Justin Trudeau resigned as leader of the incumbent Liberal Party last month, there was a sense that it was too little too late. He had no obvious popular successor. The Liberals were polling 30 points behind Poilievre's Conservatives, and an election was due by October at the latest. However, while the Conservatives are still ahead, the most recent polls suggest the Liberals are recovering fast, and will fare especially well if Trudeau is succeeded by Mark Carney, who's currently the bookies' favourite and is apparently surprisingly popular. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the most recent polls, why the Conservatives' poll lead has proved so brittle, and whether Carney can actually save the Liberals. Never miss an episode and always feel in the loop by subscribing and ringing the bell. So let's start with a bit of context. As we've explained in previous videos, and as you probably already know, Canada's incumbent Liberal Party hasn't had a good time recently. Their poll numbers have fallen steadily over the past couple of years, and by December they were about 25 points behind the main opposition party, Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives, and not much above their former coalition partners, the NDP. This was for a variety of reasons. Incumbents across the world have struggled to deal with the inflationary spike that we saw in 2022 and 2023, but quite a lot of it had to do with their leader, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. When he first came to power way back in 2015, Trudeau was incredibly popular. According to polling by Angus Reid, for his first year or two in power, his net approval hovered around +30, with about 60% of Canadians saying they approved of him and about 30% saying they didn't. However, in 2021, his rating started slowly but steadily declining, hovering around -15 for most of the pandemic, and then falling further throughout 2023 and 2024. In December, when Trump was pushing Canada to join the US and Trudeau's ministers were resigning over both his economic mismanagement and his apparent inability to handle the new president, things got really bad. Angus Reid polling found that Trudeau's net approval rating had fallen to a record low of -52, with just 22% of Canadians saying they approved of him, and just 16% of Canadians said that they intended to vote for the Liberals at the next election. Not only was he nearly 30 points behind the Conservatives and 5 points behind the NDP, it was quite possibly the worst polling in the Liberals' entire 157-year history. After all, even in their worst electoral performance ever, the 2011 election, they still won 19% of the vote, and polled at a minimum of 17% in the months leading up to it. That poll also found that less than 50% of 2021 Liberal voters intended to vote for them again at the next election. These appalling numbers forced Trudeau to finally resign in early January, kicking off a leadership election within the Liberal Party that's due to be over by March. Quite quickly, two frontrunners emerged. Trudeau's former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, who precipitated his departure by resigning in December, and former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney. Now, British viewers might remember Carney because he used to be the governor of the Bank of England as well, between 2013 and 2020, before going on to work as a UN representative, where he focused on climate issues. Carney is remembered relatively fondly in Canada, at least with the financial press, for his role in steering Canada through the 2008 crisis, when his decision to cut interest rates early helped Canada weather the subsequent storm relatively well. The Canadian economy outperformed its G7 peers in that period, and Canada was the first G7 nation to have both its GDP and employment recover to pre-crisis levels. While Carney is somewhat of an unknown quantity in Canadian politics, he's trying to turn this to his advantage by pitching himself as a fresh face to rejuvenate a stagnant party, while Freeland has argued that she's the only candidate with sufficient ministerial experience to stand up to Trump. Anyway, the important thing here is that Trudeau's resignation and the prospect of either Freeland or Carney taking over has apparently given the Liberals an immediate spike in the polls. ECOS polling carried out between the 17th and 21st of January, for instance, found that the Liberals were up to 32%, just 7 points behind the Conservatives, although we should say that this poll is currently a bit of an outlier. For instance, the most recent batch of Angus Reid polling, carried out in late January, is slightly less bullish for the Liberals, but it still suggests that both Freeland and Carney are significant improvements on Trudeau. With Freeland, the Liberals go up to 24%, but with Carney they go up to 29%, largely because Carney fares better with both NDP supporters and young voters. This is still a fair bit behind the Conservatives, who, with 43% of the vote, would still be on track for an outright majority under Canada's first-past-the-post electoral system. But it does suggest that quite a lot of the Liberals' woes were specifically to do with Trudeau, which should be cause for concern amongst Conservatives. While it's hard to properly gauge the race, given the short time frame and relatively small electorate, the bookies currently suggest Carney is the slight favourite to succeed Trudeau, and he's received by far and away the most ministerial endorsements. If Carney does indeed win, the Conservatives should be really quite worried. While he's relatively unknown at the moment, the Liberals are already up in the polls, and recent polling by Abacus Data suggests that he has a net approval rating of plus 13, way above both Trudeau and any other major party leader. This speaks to an oft overlooked fact about Canadian politics at the moment. While he's often hailed as some sort of political superstar, especially by the online right, Canadian Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre just isn't that popular. Sure, his party were polling way ahead of the Liberals, but that mainly reflected Trudeau and the Liberals' deep unpopularity, rather than Poilievre's own appeal, and his net approval rating has hovered around minus 15 for the past few years. Carney has also been helped by the fact that NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is also struggling in the polls at the moment, with his net approval rating falling from around evens to a new low of minus 25 in the past few months. Largely because, despite ripping up the confidence and supply agreement with Trudeau's government in September, Singh refused to vote against the Liberals in any subsequent no-confidence vote. This didn't go down well with voters. It looked hypocritical, it propped up a desperately unpopular government and denied voters a new election. And there was a widespread suspicion Singh was holding out until February, when he'd become eligible for his MP pension. All in all, while the Liberals are still well behind, the recent polling, plus Carney's apparent popularity, has created a glimmer of hope. And even if an outright victory in 2025 looks unlikely, it should still be enough to guard against a 1993-style collapse, which was when the Canadian Conservatives lost so badly they essentially collapsed. With the Canadian election really coming into focus, this story is only likely to get more interesting, so make sure you're following along with Ground News, a website and app developed by a former NASA engineer on a mission to give readers an easy, data-driven, objective way to read the news. They pull in stories from all over the world and organise them by story, and every story comes with a quick visual breakdown of the political bias, factuality and ownership of all the sources reporting, all backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organisations. For instance, take this story about Trump's threats to impose tariffs on Canada. Right away you can see 77 outlets reporting it, with 72% leaning left and only 20% leaning right. One of my favourite features of theirs is My News Bias. It's basically a fitness tracker, but for news. It tracks my reading habits over time, my trends in political bias, the specific news outlets I read the most, even the specific topics I gravitate towards. It's been really helpful in minimising my personal blind spots. Now, as an impartial news outlet, we're passionate about informing our viewers about bias and helping them to understand how it affects the media they consume. Ground News is very effective at this, showing you exactly how each side of the political divide covers each story you see online. And best of all, we're currently offering viewers 40% off their Vantage plan, which includes unlimited access to all of their amazing features like their blind spot feed. So go to ground.news/TLDR, click the QR code here on screen, or use the link in the description to subscribe today.